Ms. Jones. Hey, did you count how many we had in favor or against the fireworks?
I didn't. I can do that though if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. Just because welcome to the Rockport Select Board meeting. The first item on the agenda tonight is the town manager's report.
So the Maine Department of Transportation released their 2020 to 2022 work plan, which is their three-year plan, back on January 14th. And to probably a little bit of a surprise, the Pascal Avenue Bridge was not included in that work plan. Essentially, they've got the same amount of funding that they planned on using, but because of the prices of contracts, price of work, they had to trim down the plan substantially from the number of projects that they originally had funded. So it's not included in that work plan. And you probably have seen the news reports about the DOT's work plan anyway, in regards to that. The Walker Park Seawall project has been put out to bid. And it's being bid as one project with the abutting landowner, and it's being bid as an alternate, so that if the town has to do it at a separate time, then we can do that. We'll see what that price difference is, whether there's any difference or not. I assume that there would be. But we'll see. Those will be coming in, I think it's the end of this month, or if maybe the first week in February. So pretty quickly. I have been meeting with department heads and reviewing budget requests for the last couple of weeks. The manager's budget will be delivered to the Select Board and Budget Committee the week of February 10th. And for your notes, the first budget review meeting is scheduled for February 19th at 5:30 here in this meeting room. The Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation, probably Deborah will cover some of this in her liaison report. The Finance Committee has been working on to present a budget for the facility for the last, seems like 10 years. We've been meeting pretty much weekly for the last month for hours at a time to put the budget together. I'm happy to say that there is a draft that will be presented to the Board of Directors later on this week, Wednesday night, I believe, right?
Yes.
I also serve on the Strategic and Capital Planning Committee, as you know. And we did have another meeting. We're focusing now on planning for the CD&D, construction demolition debris, landfill, and what the plan is for that, the long-term plan. Because we receive different information, seems like on a weekly basis, as to the length of that landfill and how long it'll be active. So we're working on that from that committee's perspective. And this is just more of a note for the board members, really, that I've received several Freedom of Access Act requests, Freedom of Information requests, from the different incidents that have been happening in town. Not the least of which, of course, is the hotel project, as everybody has been discussing that. So I've been receiving a lot of requests for information from that. Also, the two fatals that have happened, the fatal motel fire back in December and the fatal fatal vehicle versus pedestrian accident back in December as well. It's an inordinate number. These requests have taken anywhere from 4 to 8 hours to fulfill, sometimes longer. But I think it's important that they're done well and they're done right, so I run them through my office to make sure that the proper information is released. when it needs to be. And most of the time, all the time, we're getting payment for these requests as we're allowed to by state statute as well. At your February 10th meeting, I'll have a discussion item for short-term rentals. What I plan to do is put together a timeline and a process for addressing this issue for the board to review. And we're continuing to research this in the office as well. A few things that aren't on your report that I had written last week for your packet. As you know, the parking work group that I had assembled has been working. That includes Bill Napower, Chief Randy Gagney, Planning Board Chair Joe Sternowski, myself. Doug has been interested in the topic and has been invited to join us on our next meeting, which is Friday. And of course, Public Works Director Mike Young. The first step was for the parking survey that was done 10 years ago to be updated. And that has been completed by the Planning Department. So we'll be discussing that update on Friday at our meeting. And then discussing what the next steps are for recommendations, what we need to look at that concerns parking in the downtown district. I've also been working on trying to research the road acceptance ordinance. So this ordinance deals with private roads that citizens may request to have accepted by the town for maintenance. There was a 2007 ordinance that was, after much research by myself and the town clerk, was amended in 2012. And there were proposed amendments for 2016, several proposed amendments for 2016, but only one was adopted at a town meeting vote. So I'm trying to put together the actual well-written ordinance from all of those changes, because what we've had on our site is not accurate, and what we've had in our possession is not an accurate ordinance. So that's been taking some time as well. I've been trying to help a citizen with that, so hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have that finalized, all the research done, and the correct ordinance will be available. Some things for the board to think about. It's that time of year when the town report dedication and memoriam come up for discussion, so if you have nominations or suggestions for those, please send those to Diane in my office. And there's also, from my understanding, I asked Diane how the board or how the town had handled the Spirit of America Award nominations before. And from my understanding, it simply has been given to the person that's been, that the town report's been dedicated to. Certainly can do that, but it also is a distinct and separate honor that can be bestowed on an individual in town, and essentially the Spirit of America Award focuses on volunteerism. So somebody that, in the previous year or so has provided exceptional volunteerism to the town or for an issue related to the town. So that's something that you have some thoughts on that. If you want to do that separately from the town report dedication, you can. If you do have some nominations for either, please send them along. That's all for me.
Go ahead.
Do you have anything on the Northeast Ambulance Update meeting schedule?
I'm still waiting to hear from another town. It's tentatively for February 6th at 6:30. But I'm still waiting for one more town to confirm they can have representatives there.
Yeah, that's good. Just don't want us to get in.
Yeah, it's all set and ready to go. Northeast can be there. We're just waiting for one more town to confirm.
Jeff?
Bill, when do you need the nominations or thoughts around dedication for town report?
Well, it'd be great to get them, within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Because it does take time to put the written portion of it together. The way that I've handled these in the past, and I don't know how you've done it here, but I would produce a list for the board, and you would vote on, say, for the town report nomination, you may vote on candidate A, B, C, or D, or something along those lines, just to try to protect the anonymity. I assume you'd like to do that here as well, unless it's a person that's passed or something along those lines. But that would be, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, so we can prepare that for the board to decide upon and then do write-ups and the like.
Would you just report on the status, just what you sent me in an email about the brown-tailed moth, just so people know that we're addressing it?
Sure, yes, yeah. I've met with one arborist that has, there's a couple of things that they're looking at. Of course, we discussed the injecting the trees to have a targeted effect on the individual trees. And so Mike Young, Public Works Director, has gone out to Marge Jones Fields, for instance, and we've looked at the trees and the proximity to the fields and that sort of thing, and we're putting together a plan for trimming, but also for the injections of the trees. There's still some discussion about the injections. The issue is that they work very well, but you have to get the timing exactly right, which is an issue. Walker Park, I have a solution coming up that shouldn't cost the town anything to do trimming there as well as injections. Working again with a local arborist that's getting some equipment and wants to put on a demonstration, and would use Walker Park as a source, if you will. So that would be very beneficial to us. He's purchasing some different equipment that will allow him to do some trimmings. Obviously, it's close to the water, so we have to be careful with what we do for
Yeah.
pesticide use as well. And we're building into the budget, of course, funding to be able to address this when we need to address it. I also have been in contact with the state to see what time they'd like to come down and do a presentation to the board.
Great.
I was thinking that they could do it after they do the spring survey or the late winter survey, because then they could compare the fall survey with the spring survey to see if there's been a difference in the population. That survey's probably not done until March, I've been told. So
It's late for budget.
it's a little late, yeah. And the point of the matter is residents should be trimming trees now, trying to get rid of these nests. Now is the time to do it. You get into March, and then if you get into April, then it's a little too late to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that on the short-term rentals that you reported on, the February 10th meeting, as you said, is just going to be about discussion item about timeline, how to address it, what the board's pleasure is in doing all of that. It's not going to be a substantive discussion on,
Right,
you know,
just,
the
yeah,
issue.
looking at the process itself.
Right, process. Anything else? Any other questions?
I guess I do have on the brown-tailed moth, if it's so clear that people should be trimming trees now, do we have a way, or have we already gotten that word out to the residents?
I've started drafting a press release to try to coincide with some information from the state on that as well.
Okay.
So
That's great.
then we'll get that out on the website and the Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
probably by the end of the week, we'll have that out.
Okay.
Okay, if there's nothing else for Bill, the next item on the agenda is public input on non-agenda items for anything that's not listed on the agenda, if the public wants to comment on an issue. Hearing none. The next item is amendments to the agenda. Anybody have any suggestions?
I had suggested to Ryan Gates, who's our applicant to the Conservation Committee, that he'd probably be okay if he showed up at 7 o'clock. So maybe we could make him E and move up the dark fiber in case he doesn't get here quite on time.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be flexible and keep an eye out for when he arrives. Okay, anybody else? All right. Consent agenda.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I did have one correction. Page 7 of 9, second paragraph. What I intended, or whether or not I stated it, was that all businesses in the downtown area have needed to have a waiver from the parking requirement, not change in use. So, in other words, when they applied, they couldn't meet the parking requirement, so they received a waiver from the planning board. sense.
If that's what you said, it does.
That's okay, I'll change it.
Okay, anything else? All right, all in favor of the motion? Oh, that's right. Okay, Jeff abstains.
Need to abstain. Wasn't there.
Wasn't there, right. So we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention. Okay. On the action items, the first action item is act on quitclaim deed for payment of taxes. Bill?
This is fairly simple. This is a quitclaim deed to release the town's interest in a property that was, had back taxes owed for 2016 and 17. So these can't be discharged with a simple lien discharge. It has to be a quitclaim deed.
Move the board approve the quitclaim deed for property located at 407 West Street to Richard Benner as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All right, 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is act on comprehensive plan committee application. The Clifton Ames, would you mind coming up here to the microphone, please? All right, so we have received an application from Clifton to volunteer his time to be on the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. Thank you very much. And we have two open seats to make that a complete group. So would you like to just give us just kind of summarize what you did in setting your application for us?
If I could remember what I wrote.
Longtime resident.
Yeah, longtime resident. I've been on several boards in the past. I was on the Harbor Committee for a number of years. I worked on, I believe, Capital Improvements Committee once. I worked on ad hoc committee for review of ordinances, especially related to the waterfront and that sort of thing. So I've got a little bit of experience and time in the past, and it felt funny, kind of familiar coming through the doors tonight, because it's been a while since I've been in any of the town things. Taylor Allen called me and asked me if I would, sit on board with him, and I said, sure. We've done some before in the past together, so.
Great. You also expressed some views on land use philosophy in your application. Would you just like to say a few sentences about that?
I would say my past record would speak for itself as far as I'm pretty dedicated to the landowners. If you own land and you have a specific use that isn't, a terrible use, then I would feel that, my opinion in decision-making would sway toward that route, to allow people to do with their properties, as long as, and helping. That's why I think this committee is a good one, because you can sort of tailor what's coming and give people some encouragement or discouragement when it's going to fail in the future. So.
Yep, great. Does anybody have any questions?
I wondered, I couldn't quite read the word on the second page, where it says, are there objectives you wish to see accomplished? In the second sentence there, smart future planning with an effort to maintain Rockport's history of growth as a coastal village of, and I couldn't read that last word.
I don't know what I wrote.
I think it says nature,
Nature or
it
native?
looks like,
Natives.
or native.
It is.
Yeah, so what does, I didn't know what that meant, because I thought maybe that was it, but what
I think
are natives?
I'm a native Mainer from Rockport, and I know how we've been affected in the past by changes that are made that kind of overrun us in some respects. So I think I throw a little twist in there that as a native, I think a little bit differently on some aspects. And so maybe I have a different lean on things that I can put into the mix to help maybe curb some ideas that I've seen. When I was on the Harbor Committee, I saw some really outlandish things come across the table, and I was like, wait a minute, guys. For instance, there was at one point they wanted to move the fishermen off and out, and I said, no, this is a working harbor, so we need to cater to the natives more so than we do to the transients or to somebody who's there, you know, to use the harbor for the weekend or something like that. So that's an example. So yeah, let's put the fishermen in the inner harbor. They're there every day working. So let's cater to that. So that's sort of probably what my mindset was with that. And so anything, I remember one incident, a local woman, been here forever, I went to school with her daughters. She had built a small apartment in her garage, and she was going to rent it as a supplement to her income as she retired and she was older. And there was an argument at that time why she couldn't, or why, but there was a discrepancy in why she couldn't. And when we were working on the comprehensive plan at the time, and in there they stated that they were trying to promote in-town rentals. So I said, read your own stuff. And so that was to help her. And it was something that everybody had overlooked, and then they were like, yeah, this is where we're headed. So those sort of things. That's what I mean when I say, you know, help the natives or help people that are here. And that's why I say cater to the landowners. And, you know, if you own the property, you've paid the taxes, and you've done everything correctly, and you're not in it to do some, you know, completely different, out of character project, then I think that you should, as long as you adhere to the, you know, the rules that you guys, you know, the planning board, there's so many checks and balances there, and I think that needs to be streamlined in some respects, so that's it.
Would you agree then that maybe a better choice of words might be tax-paying resident
It could be.
as opposed to native?
I suppose it would be, but there is a mindset that's different with the locals that grew here and the locals that, you know, that came here.
Yeah.
And, you know, not that I'm staunch, you know, headed to the town office with my, you know, pitchfork. I certainly understand that a lot of the people that I'm talking about are people that have moved here. And they've changed the uses, and I think those uses, you know, a lot of times are beneficial. So I'm not by any means, you know,
So in the words of Steve Beveridge, you'd like to give them a little history,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
See,
And
I
think a
don't
little-
have a problem with
maybe a little-
history.
Yeah, maybe a
But,
little continuity with being on the board, you
Yeah.
know, she was 15 years ago.
Yeah, I
20
think
years
history is a good thing, and I find it interesting too. But I will say, I have a little bit of a problem with folks when they say, well, you know, my family has lived here in Rockport for 5 generations, and so as a result of that, I should get a vote and a half.
Yeah, I don't think that,
on
but I
something,
do
so-
think it's important to remind people of the way things were and
Yeah,
how much they've
absolutely.
improved already.
Yeah.
And where are you headed with this thought? And, you know, it used to be like this, so be grateful for what you have in that respect. But,
Right.
yeah, no, it's certainly not, not saying that the native locals have more vote. We've actually lost voice, if anything, over the years. There's less and less of us who can still live here.
Yeah.
Affordable, you know, affordability-wise. And you know, I could use my grandmother as an example. So, you know, Rockport Harbor is a taxi spot, so, you know, growing up on the water like that and all, you see the changes come. So lending that portion of it, and then when I say natives, I think of myself. I don't think of, you know, necessarily that you can't be from somewhere else and live here
Yeah.
and not become very important in the, you know, in the way things go, so.
Jeff, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a motion.
Oh, okay.
See if I can get it out.
Yeah,
Have you been to China recently?
yeah, he just told me he did, 105 temperature and,
The temperature's only
Joking.
106. I
Nothing
move the
to
board
joke about.
appoint Clifton Ames to the Comprehensive Plan Committee.
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor? 500.
Good, that's probably all I
Big
need to
applause.
be here for, isn't it?
Thank you.
You're right. Do I need to stay for anything else?
No, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you.
Yes.
Night.
All right, so, well, the next item is Acton Conservation Commission bylaws. Bill?
Yes, so the Conservation Commission has had difficulty obtaining a quorum for meetings and has not had an official meeting since October because of these reasons. Some members have been ill, other members have been non-responsive. Mark probably knows this better than I do, but at the request of the chair, she asked for the membership to be reduced from 7 to 5 members, thereby reducing its quorum requirements to 3 instead of 4, and she believes that'll make a big difference in actually having the meetings. They're a little frustrated because they can't get much done if they don't have a quorum. In addition, to make the bylaws consistent with state law, I've changed the alternate position to associate members. And the associate members are non-voting members. They're different than alternates. They don't take the place of a member. And they can have as many associate members really as they desire, to help them with their work plan, for instance. So I have made the changes, the recommended changes in the bylaws, and they're in your packets for your information.
I know that they have worked, they haven't had meetings, but they have had people that have gone to Florida for the winter call-in.
Yeah.
And they've had great constructive conversations at
Right.
what would be considered a workshop.
Right.
But it has been a stretch for them to get a quorum.
Right.
I was a little bit lazy, I meant to, but I didn't. Can someone remind me exactly what the, say, the mission statement is of the Conservation Commission, or what its purpose is? What does it do for us?
I don't have it in front of me, Doug, but it's in
Neither
state,
do I.
it's in state statute.
To have
when it-
one?
When it comes to, well, not just, not to have a conservation commission. If you choose to, there are guidelines for that in state
They've
statute.
been very proactive in water quality, and last year they were, I think it was last year, it might have been 18, or both years, they were able, through grants and other monies, to be able to have several private resident wells tested that otherwise might go untested for safety reasons. And they've been working, trying to find out the goose problem, that goes down into Goodies Beach. Several water quality things that they're doing beyond the well testing. Just some of the things that come to mind of late.
Yeah, and then they have the tree planting program too,
Yep.
at the Erickson Preserves, where they're growing trees that can be planted throughout the town. And there's several trees there that actually can be planted in the spring, so the Parks and Beautification Committee should be, and have that knowledge as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've already checked the bylaws, the suggested bylaws do have the changes in them about minutes and amendments that the board requests in all of the bylaws. So, someone wants to make a motion?
I move the board approve the Conservation Commission bylaws as amended.
Second. And a half.
I think we should say Jeff seconded that because it took so much effort to get it out. Any
the next
any
one.
discussion?
And the next one.
Okay, all in favor? 500. Okay. The next item we will put off because the applicant's not here yet. So we'll go on to act on dark fiber contract template. Bill?
Yes, so this contract, we're hoping that this will serve as a template contract for any company that wants to lease strands of the dark fiber that were installed by the town with GWI back in 2014. The Schedule A is not complete in your packet. It's supposed to be a map to show where the dark fiber is located and the connections And I'm still waiting to get it. I have a map from GWI, but it's really not as specific as I'd like it to be, so I'm waiting for that. But the main goal here is to get the template approved by the board so that then when companies are interested in leasing strands of this dark fiber, we can get them all on the same page and paying the town the same rates, which would give us some revenue, which is always a good thing. And we do have one company that wants to lease some of the strands as well.
So you're saying that there was nothing in place prior to this?
Well, can I
Go ahead, Deborah.
add
She's worked
something
quite a
here?
bit on this, yeah.
So back when GWI and Maine Media Workshop and the town participated in a public-private partnership to put in that mile or so that we have of gigabit broadband service, the idea was always, by prior select boards and prior town manager, the idea was always to have an open access network, hopefully expand that, of course, throughout the town of Rockport, but with what we have right now, certainly have an open access network so that any company that wanted to lease that, any portion of that 1 mile of broadband fiber could do so for delivery of services to, the town's residents or businesses. So GWI, we looked at the GWI contract and used, our outside counsel reviewed it, used that somewhat as a template. And although there were a lot of things in the GWI contract, since they were the actual contractor that put the broadband in, there were things in there that don't apply to subsequent companies who are just going to, lease a strand here or there. So anyway, so this effort was because of a company who expressed interest in leasing a strand or so, as Bill has mentioned. But rather than put that before you, because we have to really kind of define what exactly, from this point to this point and those kinds of details, we felt that it was, it made sense to have a template so that whether, whatever broadband company would come to us and want to lease any strands, that we would do it under the same contractual terms and conditions, obviously. So that's what this is all about.
So.
I'm
what
sorry
you're-
if I didn't answer your question. I don't remember what it was.
Well,
That was the
I could
background I
tell
wanted to
because
give.
it would have been pretty quick.
Yeah, what was it?
So what you're telling me is there was nothing in place prior to this, no template, no contractual information that would have afforded a business or a company or an individual to do business through the town?
No, I did sort of answer it in the sense that the contract
got
that
lost,
exists.
sorry.
I'm sorry, but I wanted to provide that background for everybody and everybody watching. The existing contract was with GWI. So what happens is that GWI constructed the system for us, right?
Right.
And then they lease that fiber back from us. They also have to maintain it, so their relationship with the town is a little different than others. You can't have multiple companies maintaining the same fiber system, right? So, so we took the GWI contract in large part. Phil took out our outside counsel took out the items that really didn't apply, and I worked with him a little bit on that to then have a template going forward. So this contract is not with individual businesses, it's not with individual residents, it's with companies who actually deliver the broadband service. LCI, GWI, Pioneer is up down east, so it's with those companies that deliver it.
So there hasn't been a template in place before.
Right.
Yeah.
Just the GWI contract, though, has been in place. And this is as consistent with the GWI contract as is appropriate.
And just to add some more information to that too, a little bit off top, well, not really off topic, but the contract with GWI, essentially what it does is that there was no payment to them for their labor costs when they were installing the dark fiber back in 2014. So what they're doing is that the amount of money that they pay for the strands that they lease from the dark fiber, they take out of their labor costs. So instead of giving the check to the town and then the town giving it back to them for the labor. So once we reach the place where the labor has been paid for, then the town will be receiving a direct payment from them. That hadn't been tracked in 5 years, and so
Is there a projection of when that might be?
another 5 years. But it hadn't been tracked previously, and then when I made contact with them and said, hey, we haven't, I don't see any reports, information on this. And then I got the reports and information, and they're gonna be tracking it quarterly for us so we can see that. In addition, if this is approved, this template, including the rates that are in Schedule B, that's less than what GWI is currently paying. However, I can notify them of an increase, and then in 120 days, then those new rates will go into effect. So that'll shorten the time where we'll get the buyback, if you will, for the labor.
I move the board approve the dark fiber contract template as presented.
Second?
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? 500. Okay, so now we'll go back to, perfect timing, to action item D, Act on Conservation Commission application. Ryan, would you please come up? So we have an application from Ryan Gates to fill a vacancy on the Conservation Commission. Bill, did you want to add anything, or?
Well, what I'll say is that since the board has approved the new Conservation Commission bylaws, then some of those members they're currently voting members, but they'll be moved to the associate positions, and the commission can do that per state law. So they'll be moved, those 3 will be moved into associate members, and that leaves an opening on the Conservation Commission of the now 5 members instead of 7.
And that's the position that Ryan has applied for.
Yes.
So Ryan, would you like to just give us a little background, and like you did in your application?
Sure. My name's Brian Gates. I live here in Rockport. I've lived in Rockport for about 7 years now. I have a degree in park management with a focus on law enforcement, although I figured out early that I didn't want to be a police officer. I currently work for Coastal Mountain Land Trust. I'm the stewardship project manager for the southern region. So what that means is I cover from Beach Hill here in Rockport to the Duck Trap River. Myself and the other gal that I work with, we split about 12,000 acres. And I have my heart's in the right place for conservation, and I think I'd be an added bonus to the Conservation Commission. Prior to working for Coastal Mountain Land Trust, I worked at Aldermere Farm, worked and lived at Aldermere, and I was the operations manager there for about 6 years, and decided that I didn't want to farm anymore when this job at Coastal Mountain Land Trust opened up. So I applied and got that about a year and a half ago from now. So, like I said, I live right here in town, and my wife and I have 2 small children. We're involved in the community. Both work for nonprofits, and have a pretty good head on our shoulders. We don't do anything irrational, and that type of stuff. So I think I'd be a bonus to the, like I said, to the Conservation Commission.
And yet you want to get on a committee.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Rational.
If you don't get involved, you don't have a say.
That's right.
That's all right, put the sign up.
I will say that the meeting we had in early January, Ryan was there and sat in and provided a lot of great conversation and information about things that came up. And I would move the board appoint Ryan Gates to the Conservation Commission for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Ryan was also at a meeting that I went to with a number of different groups, including Pathways, the other night. I think, Jeff, you went there after I did, and it was great to hear your presentation and so forth. So
Yeah.
thank you for applying. Anybody else?
Ryan, is it true that you own a dog that used to run at large on Russell Avenue? when you
Yeah.
lived over
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, that dog since passed away, Doug.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. Micah. Not Astrid. Astrid, I still have Astrid. But
Yeah.
Micah. Yes, Micah did run it large.
Got hit by a guy with a blue pickup with a plate number 873.
I also had some wild chickens that you may remember that were also in your garage at one point.
And I also noticed you majored in park management.
That's correct, yeah.
And as you probably know, we're looking for people on the Parks Committee.
Correct.
And boy, that seems like a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, it probably would be, however, not right now.
All right.
Okay, there's a motion on the table, all in favor? 500. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks, you too. Okay, now we're moving into discussion items. The first one is the Library Foundation update.
Nice to see these young men, members of our community, signing up for some good things. That's great. Well, I guess I want to start off by giving a huge thank you to certainly you all, but to the whole town, because we have met our goal. In fact, we've surpassed it by a little. So we've raised $2 million. We've got the money to build the library. It won't all come in, this year, but the end of this year, the end of next year, we should be good. And we're very excited about it, and we're just thrilled. And truly want to say to the many large donors and small donors who stepped up to the plate and who've just been very generous. And I have to say, too, our challenge match that we had that gave challenge to put $200,000 up and with a challenge to match that. And we came at a little over $300,000 to match the 200 that were put up by some very generous donors who this challenge match was in addition to some very wonderful leadership gifts that they had already given. So it's been wonderful. We have a little under 200 donors from the community who have helped make this happen. And in a small town of 3,000 people approximately, to have such a success. Pardon me? Oh, we do. Okay. Stand corrected. We have 300 donors. In any case, every single one has been really important and have helped us reach this goal, and we're very, very excited and thankful. And that said, we also now, the board has agreed that we will stretch a little more, one more time, although we do want the foundation to continue over the years to help support the library in smaller ways. But we do want to help the town raise the money for the furniture that's going to be needed for the library so that when it does open, everything will look beautiful and people will feel welcome and excited about being in that wonderful space. We do believe we'll have another challenge match to do. We haven't put that all in place yet, but we're not quitting yet, and hoping that when September comes, end of August comes, we will have a beautiful library to walk into with lovely chairs and desks and things for our community to use. So.
That's great. How much, do you know how much your new goal is going to be?
Well, we're waiting to find an exact number of what the furniture and fixtures is actually going to be. But we're thinking it may be, we're looking at about $250,000, but we're not sure yet until we have. Yeah. But that's what we're aiming for. So.
Thank you for all your efforts, yours, Phil's, John's, Bill Leone, and others who I can't
We've had a
begin to
great
name.
team.
It's really been
And
fantastic.
Helen Shaw and Sally Cook and John Beeman are here, and a great council with Philip Conkling. And it's been a great team. Everyone has pitched in their niche. And we've met every Monday for a year and a half. We're all excited to think we might have some Mondays off. We're going to meet once a month instead of every week. But everyone's worked hard, and everyone is said they would do what they promised they'd do, and has been very collegial, and we're very, very excited. Meet our goal.
And you guys have maintained a very positive attitude the whole time, telling us that you would meet it, and you did.
Well,
Great.
we've had wonderful support from the community. I mean, that's, you know, every part of the community has helped in many large and small ways, and that's what's made it successful. So,
Great.
okay,
Thank you all very much.
great.
Okay, the second item is the update on broadband activities. I think that the draft articles in here are a little, not quite the final ones, but they're 99% there, I think. So,
They've
Go
gone
ahead,
through so
Phil.
many iterations that
I know.
lost
Go
track.
ahead.
But I think if these aren't the
Yeah.
final ones, they're real close, so. I just want to touch base on this a little bit. You may have seen the first article that was in the Village Soup, and I certainly thank the Village Soup for allowing us to run the guest column, and columns as we continue on. But there are a series of articles that will be coming out. I've included the first three for your information. And basically, it's just to educate the public on what broadband is and why it's important and why it's something that the towns of Camden and Rockport are looking at. And certainly Deborah can provide additional information as she's been on that working group, if you will.
Yeah, so the first articles were really aimed at, the basics about broadband. The next articles, which are in the course of being drafted, really go to the heart of the practical aspects of broadband, like telehealth, teleworking, telecommuting, education in particular. So there'll be about a total of about 7 articles, if you count the one that recently ran. And John has been on that group, sitting in the
Yes.
audience.
And the goal of these, after all the articles are out there, is that there'll be a survey that will be
Yes.
conducted in Rockport as well as Camden, I believe, to gauge people's interests and thoughts about it. And because it's a technical subject, that's why part of the reason why we wanted to get some education out there so that people could really understand it. Along the same lines of the EMS education effort that we hope to launch later on this year, have people at least give the information so that they have an understanding of what it is that we're talking about, so that then they can have an educated voice when they do take a survey, so that we had a better response, or a more educated response when we do have survey questions that go out.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that, and the purpose of the survey, well, not only is to gauge how people feel about the topic, it's also aimed at the fact that if you have a certain percentage of responses that suggest that they're very interested in better internet connectivity, then that starts providing the basis for us to be able to reach out to some companies who might be willing to fund the actual build of the broadband system, as opposed to through taxpayer dollars.
And to piggyback on that too, any survey like that is necessary when you're looking at a Connect Main grant, which obviously there's been a widespread focus now on broadband internet connections. And Janet Mills had said something in her State address as well about providing more funding for Connect Main grants, basically. So that's a positive, but the survey would have to be part of that background work done by the town. So this lays a good foundation for applying for a Connect Main grant later on as well.
One of your comments earlier, Bill, was kind of a good segue into it's really more of a procedural question. But I want to preface it by saying I think education is good. I actually enjoyed that article very much because I'm not very literate in that. But I guess the procedural question is, I was a little bit surprised when the article showed up because it hadn't really, in my opinion, been vetted through the select board. And, the question is, is the select board now saying that, we're sort of in favor of moving ahead with the broadband, or are we just educating people? And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, because I think it'd probably be a good idea, but it's just, if we made a policy decision that this is what we're gonna do.
Well, let me address first off the articles. A few months ago, we had agreed that we were going to enter into this whole education effort. And I had suggested that we not want to be in a position of bringing it back to the select board for micromanaging, the articles. And this was a result of the Camden Rockport ad hoc group. And so I suggested that rather than me, there was some suggestion that I or members of the group should sign these articles. And I suggested at that time, would you guys be okay with the town managers of the two towns signing off on the articles, so that it didn't have the select board saying this was from them, or an implied thing with me signing it. And so the board agreed to that. So
Okay,
it was
and I'd
always.
forgotten that,
Yeah, it
so,
was
okay.
agreed that this is the process that we would
All right.
follow. So, and as to the second point, the select boards prior to us had a definite policy in favor of broadband and bringing broadband for the whole town. And so unless we want to come back and overturn that select board position that was taken, then I think we do have a policy that favors extending broadband. But the details, like anything, the devil is in the details. How do you do that? And the whole idea is to try to do it, in my view, and it's my 20% opinion, is to try to do it without raising taxes. And so that's what we're working toward. But we do have a policy of the town that supports it.
Yeah, but there was a vote. And again, I'm just trying to be completely transparent.
Yes,
that,
right,
there
right,
was a
right.
vote. Now, this was a long time ago, and as I pointed out at previous meetings, the technology's changed, all sorts of things have changed, and indeed, we should be looking at it.
Yeah.
But I don't want us to lose sight of history, too, as we move forward. But
Yeah, well, the vote was not to spend the $300,000 or $400,000 to do a study, which frankly, in retrospect, really, actually, all along, I kind of think that was a good vote. But it was not to change the policy of the town as established by the select board. It was the expenditure of those funds on it, or at least that's how I interpret that vote as being.
And again, I think keep in mind that the goal of the educational effort is then to have a survey so that people can have an educated response when they're doing those surveys. And the surveys may come back and give you a completely different policy direction.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
And that's, one of the things too is, as has been mentioned, that this board can't be held to what other boards have done. But I am also on your side when it comes to, if we can get somebody else to foot the bill, because we've got many things that are on our plate and more that are coming, and we just need to keep that in mind when we're keep adding things to the plate.
And I agree with you in the sense that we can't be held to what other select boards do, but then, there needs to be a sense of consistency in governing the town. So, if we go too far, and I know that you're not suggesting that, Mark, but if you take it too far, that every select board is a new day, then we could just overturn the decisions that were made on the library, when they made the decision to keep the library in the town. We took that decision to be one that the select board had decided, and so, but sometimes there's reason to change a policy.
And I think what Doug might have been alluding to, that this decision by the board, that would have been $300,000 or $400,000 perhaps, was 4-5 years ago?
Yeah, it was quite a few.
So,
4 or 5,
things,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
things have changed, so
Yeah.
their position might not match today's reality.
Yeah, right.
I
And,
think there's a couple things that we can certainly agree on. We as a select board agreed several months ago to sanction, if you will, a communication information process, which is what this is about. Secondly, I think a great way to institute our policies, beliefs, whatever, is certainly in the comp plan, where we include what we think we want as far as broadband and 5G and anything else, cell phone tower, location usage, whatever it might be. We can include that in the comp plan, and then that will provide the consistency from time frame to time frame and select board to select board.
It's another great selling point for
point.
people and companies to come, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And Camden has as one of its number one priorities, I think one of the top 2 or 3 priorities in Camden in their comp plan is broadband. So, and I think it's, you know, it's maybe another one is more opportunities for younger families and economic development. But it was something like that, you know, where the 3 really just go hand in hand. But it's a good point, Jeff, about the comp plan. And I think, I just read something in the comp plan that touched on it too, in the current one. Anything else?
Just one last thing, I'm sure the due diligence is being done, but are we making sure that the facts that we're quoting in here are rock solid?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I asked Bill to
I
include this
wouldn't
in.
want us to be victims of factcheckers.com.
Right, right, no. I asked Bill to include this because I didn't want, although maybe the first one caught you by surprise, I didn't want the other ones to catch you by surprise. I wanted you to see them even though we're not voting on them per se.
So these have yet to be, the second
Yes,
2 haven't
that-
been published.
That's right, just that first one has been. And as I said, there's going to be about 3 more after that, which are in the process of being drafted. John smiles. Okay, the next discussion item and perhaps action item, depending on what the board wants to do, is fireworks petition and next steps. Bill, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. So you'll recall last fall, the resident had complained about, had a fireworks complaint. And then she subsequently followed that up with a petition that was submitted to the town clerk's office with signatures asking for the town to ban fireworks. The petition is not worded to be a valid petition, and it didn't receive the required number of signatures according to the town's charter and state statutes. So it's not a valid petition that the board is required to act on. However, after that, if you'll remember that the board had directed me to research municipalities in the area to determine what ordinances were in existence and if there were any restrictions on fireworks or what they did. In your packet of material, you do have the petition with the signatures, but later on in that, you have a sheet that's called Fireworks Ordinance Research. And we looked at the towns of Camden, Lincolnville, Rockland, Belfast, Thomaston, South Thomaston, Union, Hope. And out of those, only Union and Hope have no restrictions, no ordinances on fireworks. And then the other towns and cities that are listed, there are various restrictions. Of note, Camden prohibits the sale and use. City of Rockland prohibits the sale and use. Belfast, the same, prohibits the sale and use. And I should say that none of these, they do allow fireworks displays by licensed fireworks companies, such as Camden's celebration with their fireworks that are sponsored. Those are allowed per their ordinance. And then the other communities have various restrictions, and I've listed them there so that you can see what they are. And we haven't looked at any other towns, but those are most of the towns and cities in the area anyway, with their different restrictions. So I did not put in, at least I think, we did put in some of the email correspondence that we received when we put on the website and Facebook asking for people to comment on what their feelings were about fireworks, so you see those as well. And there's a mix there of responses.
So when I looked at the signatures, just trying to count them up now while you were talking, there's over 100 signatures, it seems like. Does that sound right? 120 or so? I was looking at.
124.
I was looking at the totals at the bottom.
There's 124 that were certified.
And how many were needed?
100 and, I don't remember, Linda, 179 was it?
And
That we need, yeah.
Is it 20% of
It was, yeah.
Okay, and just as a reminder for our West Coast audience, that 20% would then have initiated what action?
Well, in this case, it wouldn't have initiated anything because the petition wasn't worded correctly.
Right, all right.
So there's
but
two
had the-
different,
Had the petition been worded correctly and had 20% of the registered voters in the town of Rockport signed the petition, what
Then-
would have occurred?
then the board would have needed to call a vote on the language that was submitted in the petition.
On the ballot, right?
Yes.
For the ballot.
Yeah.
Or it could be a special town meeting. Is that, yeah,
Yeah, but a town vote.
yeah. But the town would have to vote on it.
So the other options are?
The other options, it's up to the board. You can do what you'd like to do. That's what the question about next steps is. I mean, you could draft an ordinance and have public hearings on it or workshops on it to see if anybody comes out to express their opinions on it. You could draft an ordinance to ban them. You could draft an ordinance to restrict them during certain times or days of the week. It's really up to the board as to what you want to do with your next steps.
And there's no, if we did, and I just throw this out there just to make sure we have all the options on the table, I'm not voicing a preference one way or the other. If we wanted to require a permit, could we do that without an ordinance?
I think you have to do that with an ordinance.
You do.
Yeah, because it's specific to state law with fireworks now.
How about considering we don't have anything now? And I'm not saying that we necessarily need an ordinance, but why don't we have, well, perhaps we do need one, but how about we use our fire chief's ability to help the manager come up with something like the other towns have that, I mean, I'm looking at Lincolnville's, and that's pretty, detailed. And, which is fine, if that's the direction you want to go. I mean, the chief up there is pretty good, very good. I mean, Camden's is simple, no sale and use.
Yeah, and could we just go through, just for a minute, just for people watching, and just mention what the other towns have, and this chart that Bill put together. So the town of Camden prohibits sale and use, as Mark just said. Lincolnville has certain restrictions on it. You can't do it when there's a fire danger of a class 4 or 5 nature. You can't do it on town-owned property. You can do it allowed in a general zone from 9 to 10 all year. So you really can do fireworks, just with certain restrictions. Allowed longer hours than 10. On July 4th and December 31st. That's Lincolnville. Then thirdly is Rockland, which prohibits the sale and use. Belfast prohibits sale and use. Thomaston prohibits sale and allows permits through the select board as long as those permits are submitted 1 month in advance. Proof of insurance, and you have to provide evidence to the abutters that you've notified them. That's Thomaston. The town of South Thomaston actually really permits it, in my view, in the sense, again, it does a class 5 fire danger. It's not allowed on those days. It's allowed on a person's own property or with a person consenting. And it has, time restrictions, except for July 4th and December 31st. And then Union, Hope, and Rockport, as you said, don't have any ordinance, which leaves it to the state.
Right, yes.
Maybe Bruce could pull that up on the screen while we're discussing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Doug.
And of course,
So-
the other option that the board has is you do nothing. And then
Right.
And then you fall into what you currently have,
Yep.
so.
Well, I'm willing to express my personal opinion, which I'll do, and then I'm prepared to make a motion of some sort, depending on how it goes. But when I first heard about this, I have to say that my libertarian streak was pretty skeptical of it. But since then, I've taken time to look over the list of signatories, various people that I do know and I respect, and I read the various emails, both sort of pro and con. And so I guess I'm starting to come down on sort of the side that we probably should have an ordinance that limits these.
More than state law currently.
More than state law, right. I mean, I could even go as simple as Camden that just says no sale or use. On the other hand, if one of my colleagues here wanted to, limit hours or days, I'd certainly consider that too. So basically what I'm saying is I think it would be okay to go ahead and have our own ordinance to limit the use to some degree.
And I think if we are going to have an ordinance, I mean, we have ordinances on there now that have like a $25 fine that doesn't cover anything with regards to costs. When you have to give it to the manager has to give it to the town council for them to review. I mean, it's bigger than $25, so if you're going to have an ordinance, it should have some teeth in it too to cover any type of expenses or costs or penalties.
I mean, I'm wondering if we could get a sense of how people on the board feel, and if there is a consensus, then we could send this to the ordinance review committee to draft it up for us.
In my tenure as chief, there was several organizations. The Samoset was a big one when they had weddings and other functions, and they were very good about telling us ahead of time. And, you have your random people that will just do it because they're by their own and they'll set them off in their own yard. It's an inconvenience and it is a danger, given the circumstances at the time, but we ought to have something, I think, that will help keep it controlled.
Yeah, let me be very clear, because I realized from what you just said, I feel also very strongly that licensed firework displays in Rockport should be permitted. In other words, Samoset, happenings on the harbor, all of those are definitely good for the community. I did receive an email a while back from Connie Russell at the Samoset, and he felt that this is an important part of his business model. So when I say we should have an ordinance limiting the use, I'm referring only to consumer-grade fireworks, okay? Not any of the professional organizations that put on professional shows.
How about, I'll go back to throwing it back to Jason and Bill to just come up with something, given what our neighbors have been doing, that's not,
I think the board
Too
sets
restrictive.
policy, and I think we need to give them a little more guidance than just, what they think
Well,
is best.
well, we have a fire chief, we have other, I'm sure, fire chiefs that have given their opinions with regards to their policies for their towns. And, we're not the professionals there. I mean, we should just say, okay, either we want one or we don't, and let them come up with something and bring it back to us.
But sorry, I just wanted to throw this in there when you say, look at what our, based on what the other neighboring towns are doing. When I look at this chart, I see 3 that prohibit and 3 that allow it. So, I mean, Camden, Rockland, and Belfast all prohibit it, whereas Lincolnville, Thomaston, South Thomaston have some kind of, advanced certain danger, fire danger days. So, you got 3 and 3 here, so.
And you have,
In terms of the towns.
you have some that mention restriction in the harbors. I mean, Camden just says prohibit sale and use, but yet they have some in the harbor.
Well,
So it's not totally
yeah,
fleshed out for,
keep in mind that any ordinance would be on consumer fireworks.
Yes,
So,
right.
Right.
Doug's points and the Camden display of fireworks, those are licensed
Yeah.
technicians, and those are generally allowed in every community when it comes to fireworks, because those aren't consumer fireworks. Those are commercial
Bill,
grade.
could you describe the amount of time and activity it would take to get from where we are today to a vote, ballot question on the next election? that says, do you favor blah, blah, blah ordinance?
I don't think we'd be able to get it to the June.
Okay, but how many workshops, meetings, hours?
Well, I think we could, thinking of staff, myself and the fire chief, the police chief, we could put something together. It would be good to have some guidance, whether you're looking for like a permit type system, and I think the sense is, that I'm getting now is restrictions, and then perhaps a permit system. I've seen those in the emails about, so that people would know, you know, what's going on, so they'd have notice, if you will. If we're looking at something like that, I mean, you know, we probably could have something ready by November, but you'd want to have probably a couple of different, either workshops or comment period for the public to be able to weigh in on those drafts when we brought them to the board. And it's gonna take some time. I mean, don't forget, we're in the middle of the budget season, so.
Oh, that's where I'm trying to get through the
Yeah.
point of, we've got an awful lot of stuff on our plate, everything from comprehensive plan development to
Yeah.
a budget cycle to RES redevelopment to a library to finish up, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
You know, what is the amount of work that would be required to bring this to closure? And if it's multiple workshops and hundreds of hours of,
I mean, it's not gonna be hundreds of hours, but it's gonna take a fair amount of time for us to be able to continue looking at other areas, so.
Yeah, but you have
Well,
enough
then we
there.
have the
You've got,
ordinance
you've
review
got
committee.
six.
We do have
You've got the
six.
ordinance review committee, you've got 6 templates, you know, I wouldn't think that that is gonna be, the most onerous part is I would think, would be the process of the workshops and,
Yes.
and getting it on the warrant. you know.
let me ask a different question. What if you did a survey monkey to the townsfolk and said, what are your feelings on this?
Well, we asked them on the website.
We asked them on Facebook and on the website.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's what
total
generated these
responses were,
Yeah, we didn't get a huge amount of
you
response.
didn't get a huge amount of response, so it's,
But you do have you have 124 people who signed a petition.
You did, and I think if we draft something and then have it in writing, people could look at it and then they'd probably be more likely to comment.
Well, and the petition was to ban, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We would have to have, Linda, isn't it April,
April 13th is the.
yeah, it's like April 9th or 10th, we have to have everything ready for the
Yeah,
ballot, so I don't
so-
think that that's really feasible.
No, doesn't sound that way. So, okay, so Mark and Doug, just in taking sort of a temperature of the board, have, I think, supported some kind of potential restriction. And I don't know if Jeff or Denise want to weigh in. I will weigh in at the end.
Yeah, I'm torn on this because I sort of see what Doug is saying. I feel like our plate is pretty full and we owe it to our town to get some of these other projects done. You know, the ORC, we've got so much work on the land use ordinance and, you know, so to be drafting new ordinance language, it could be done if we decided that's what we wanted to do. At that point, and partly because the petition is banning it, that would be my inclination, is to just not try to have an ordinance that will require a lot of work to enforce, and people won't quite understand what hours they can do it, or even the advance notice, because I don't think that addresses the problems in the petition, which is, it's just very distressing to certain groups in our population to just hear fireworks, whether they get advance notice or not. But I'm torn because I feel personally overwhelmed with all the different committees and the things that we're all trying to do as a town, all with good things for our town. But to add one more thing on our plate right now,
And I would just say that the 124, or whatever the number was, is a far greater number that wanted some action, you know, up to including banning it. It far exceeds what we've heard that want to continue to have it. So, you know, it does bear some,
no, it's.
I mean,
those
we
are our-
haven't.
Those are our residents, and
All
that's
right,
who
I
we
mean,
serve, so.
we haven't had that many people jump up and say, hey, no. You know, we've had
We've got 4 emails.
whatever the
saying-
emails are. You know, it's worth taking a look to see if we can, it's more about giving guidance about common sense in your usage. you know, if you want to put that in an ordinance, then
Well, and also, I didn't mean to imply that I thought that this had to be, you know, top priority and move it forward. But, you know, just put it in the pot, and, you know, prioritize it, you know, maybe later this summer or fall when things
Put it
calm
on-
down a little.
put it on in November.
Yeah, get the comprehensive
Well,
plan.
or even next June,
Well, I mean, November, you're going to have a far greater
turnout.
turnout
Certainly
because of
will.
the presidential election, so you'll get a better temperature of the public. I
But
think that
again, like Denise says, that may be asking in a lot of our, even for November, maybe asking a lot of our town office.
I think we could probably get it done by November easily.
Yeah, it doesn't. Jeff, do you have anything that you want to say with respect to your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
The voters need to decide, just a question of how much work is it gonna take to get there and when.
When we do.
We
mean-
could have it ready for the November
And
ballot.
And it would be to me, it would be a one-sentence
short
voter
and sweet.
question. It would be, do you favor an ordinance that prohibits the sale and use of fireworks in the town of Rockport? And it'd be that clean and simple. And then you'll find out from the vote whether it's a yea or a nay.
And I have to say that I feel, much like Doug, that I was probably not inclined to restrict this when I first heard about it. Although I do have empathy for kids, pets, older people, you know, and the point of changing the time, well, you know, people pointed out to us, you have to have the time fairly late because in the summer, you know, you have to have fireworks in the park, and so you can't make it too early, the ending time. I was also, you know, playing around with the idea of notice, you know, that you could do a permission sort of, you know, approval. But the problem with that, seems to me that if you then give certain permissions and you put that on, for example, the town website, if I'm a person who's really bothered by this and I go and look at the town website today, and don't see anything coming up, I could look at the, you know, I could miss something. I'd have to look at the town website every day, theoretically, in order to, you know, to avoid the situation. So I think I lean actually, after looking at all this and how strongly, at least the residents who have been vocal about it, have voiced it, I would lean toward a question, a potential ordinance banning it, except for the town and licensed. I assume that Samoset has licensed professionals do theirs, and
I would
any
be
others.
in favor of the voters determining whether, to your point.
Yeah,
The voters determining whether they want to ban it or not.
Yes.
But it's, to be honest with you, it's not on my short list of things to do right off.
right.
It's a someday thing.
Well,
And
Yeah.
it would be done with the minimum amount of effort.
so are you suggesting, Jeff, that, and Bill, what I think I'm hearing Jeff say is just asking the question
Well,
of whether or not residents support a ban other than, you know, for residential
Support an
use.
ordinance banning.
Yes, or, and then taking that response that we get from the voters and then going forth with drafting an ordinance, doing workshops,
you-
whatever,
you
or
could-
not.
You could, if the board approved the question of, are you in favor of banning fireworks, then that would be the answer to your question. You wouldn't need to develop an ordinance.
Except you have to make it clear that
Consumer
it's
fireworks.
residential, consumer,
Yeah.
you know, not town.
And there's wording,
Or licensed
when this law
professionals.
first came into effect, there's wording in state law that says you can, this is the wording to use if you want to.
And that's something we could do on June, right? In June?
You could, yes, you could do
I
that
mean,
in
that
June.
doesn't require any workshops, any work other than just including that on the ballot, right?
Is that correct? We don't have to develop an ordinance beforehand? We
Yeah,
don't have
I
to
like,
do workshops?
I like that idea.
The ordinance would be, I'd have to definitely look to see
Okay.
if we'd have to write the ordinance, but the ordinance would simply be they're banned,
Yeah.
you know,
So,
and
I
that would
mean,
be it. So that would be a very simple,
That's where I am, and then
very
the
simple
voters
thing.
can decide one way or another, and life goes on.
So if there's sort of a, if there's a consensus here, then somebody could make a motion, I guess, to have you pursue the potential of putting the simple question that we've discussed on the ballot in June to find out from the voters what the will of the people is.
One quick question, and I don't think it's required, but I think historically, the ballot questions have had a little line that says, select board
Oh, right.
recommends,
Yeah.
you know, blah, blah. Do we have to do that, or can we just leave that all off?
You have to do it for budget items,
Yeah.
but for others, you don't have to have
Oh.
that.
Okay, so
Okay,
we could just
so we
leave
could,
it.
so we could punt it to the voters,
Yeah.
which is what we're
is what we
trying
wanna
to do.
do.
We want
So
to
why-
know what the people think.
So why don't, instead of making a motion, why don't we just
I can-
table it until,
Well,
If this is the direction you want to go in, I certainly could draft something and bring it back for you to look at.
yeah, white
Okay,
table.
let's do that.
White
Could we
table
do
it.
that?
Well, Bill can come back with what we can actually
Right.
vote on.
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
we
don't
The,
need to
the
vote.
actual
With
question,
language
but that's,
tonight.
yeah, as opposed to tabling
We
it.
could-
You'll go down that,
If
go
that's the
down-
consensus of the board, certainly.
Yeah,
This is
you'll
a
pursue.
discussion item, so you don't have to have an action
Right,
item. and You
right,
can just give me
right.
guidance
So
as
you'll
to.
bring it back.
Later, we can vote on the proposed wording for the ballot question, correct?
Correct.
That sounds good to me.
For June,
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
That's
Right.
not overly burdensome for you?
no, that's very easy.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. All right, okay. All right, so then there's, future meetings that are listed on the agenda item, or on the agenda rather. A bunch of budget review meetings coming up. Nomination papers, are available at the town office, March 2nd. So anyway, folks can take a look at that. The next item after that is select board liaison reports, so who wants to start?
can you make that bigger on the screen so people might be able to see it at home? So, yeah, because I didn't think I mean, you're not giving dates and stuff, and I don't know.
Okay. Do you
don't know
want
as
me to
they-
give dates?
Well, I don't know as they can read that.
Yeah,
from-
do you want me to give dates? It's I mean, the town manager's report is published in the paper and everything.
No,
I
but
think, isn't it?
the meetings and papers and stuff.
That's on the agenda, so. You want to start with the,
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I want to touch, first of all, on the planning board. And this doesn't have anything to do with the hotel or parking or anything else, but speaking with several people on the planning board, they feel that it would be very helpful to them if the select board could help set up educational session with Maine Municipal Association and Bill Napower and Scott Bickford to help the planning board really understand its purpose and what its charge is and how these things work. And it was interesting, I'm going to play tag team here with Denise for the zoning board of appeals because she has a comment to make, similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who watched or was at the zoning board of appeals meeting this Wednesday night, it was not, it had to have been very frustrating and was, I know, frustrating for several of the ZBA members I spoke with. It was a meeting that started at 5:30, ended after 9 o'clock on an issue that a lot of people thought could have taken less than an hour. But it was hard to watch. And I think that some training, some leadership would help, so that citizen boards, because I worry that we'll lose good people. That's more of a commitment, I think, than people intend when they sign on for a committee like that. It's one thing to do the library appeal, which was full-blown, lots of issues, and yes, that took some time, but this issue shouldn't have taken very much time. But it was really just some citizens wrestling with, I mean, they're essentially a quasi-judicial panel, which is something that lawyers know how to do and judges know how to do, but citizens don't necessarily understand that. And so I think the town could help our volunteers on these committees. And I think really particularly the planning board and the zoning board of appeals are the two quasi-judicial groups that I think could benefit from some guidance. You know, a lot of it comes down to the chair. If you have a chair who is used to doing that, has a background in it, that can help. I think the town staff people can help with that. I'm not sure, because this was a new process to me to watch. I mean, I was at the ZBA appeals for the library, and that sometimes felt like it was more complicated or longer than it needed to be. But I feel like the town could help more here.
Yeah,
Can I just, one quick second? From my understanding, there was a training for the planning board last March, I believe, that was put on by the town.
Okay. So the planning
Okay.
board
For
has
planning
had
board,
that.
they've had that. When Joe Sternowski took over as chair of the planning board, I had reached out to him and provided him the MMA training for planning boards, because that's offered every
Yeah.
few months, that ZBA members or planning board members can attend, and the town will pay for that training. Now, granted, they have to drive to Augusta usually to,
Right.
you know, to see that, to have that training. But we certainly can have, you know, MMA officials will be more than happy to come down and provide training for the ZBA and the planning board members. But I think it's important to note that there was that training last March that the planning
Yeah.
board was
Well,
invited to attend.
Again, I think the point is that I don't think it's fair to our citizens, especially on the quasi judicial boards, you know, to just have people sort of take a seat and then be expected to be an active participant. So, you know, probably wouldn't hurt doing it even twice a year for folks, so. Anyway, that's a request.
And I'm not against that. I think
Yeah.
that, you know, I think it's important to, you're right when it comes to the volunteers. I mean, they're spending their time, so it's important that they're given some guidance through trainings about what the process is and how a meeting should be run and, you know, the order of operations, if you will,
Yeah.
as well. So I'm certainly not opposed to that.
And I wondered, only because I am again new to some of this, if the staff person who maybe has more background and training can play a larger role in a hearing like that. You know, Bill Napower was there.
It's important that you keep in mind that the ZBA is a very different animal than the
Yeah.
planning board, than the select board, than a regular volunteer committee. So they have in the statutes, there are very
Right.
specific, as well as the land use ordinance, obviously, in this
Right.
community, that defines what it is that they can do and what they can't do. So I think it's important to note that as well. So you'd almost have to have, I'm
But
just
there were-
thinking,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, there were times where, actually quite a bit of time, where they were just wrestling with not understanding how the process in the town worked, if a permit was issued, or what their ruling would mean and how it would get implemented. And it felt like maybe if we'd given them a little more guidance earlier in that, maybe the discussion wouldn't have gone on so long. But you know, again,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And it wouldn't be trying to short-circuit their important discussion on the ruling they have to make.
Right.
That's up to them, and they have to have their own process for that. But to give them some more background and how this really fits in with what we're asking them to do.
And I haven't viewed the whole meeting.
Yeah, you should. You should. I
I've seen
did today.
twice.
And I agree with Doug and Denise that there needs to be some training and there needs to be some, you know, some focus. I mean, this was a very focused question that the planning board gave to the ZBA, and it shouldn't have taken 4 hours. I'm sorry. But, and that's not to, you know,
Yeah, I don't
to
think it's-
criticize anybody on the ZBA. They did a great job, you know, really thoroughly discussing the issues, but they discussed issues that went beyond what was before them. And I think that some of them expressed that view that that was happening. I think one person said, we've not just taken a step out of our lane, we've swerved all the way off the road or whatever. So, you know, I mean, it was recognized. I've heard one complaint from a ZBA member, so it was, you know, rather frustrated about it.
Yeah, so maybe you might have some thoughts if you watch it as to ways that we could.
Yep.
And, you know, a big part of it is that it shouldn't have gone to the ZBA. I mean, our ordinance is written that it goes to the ZBA, but it's sort of a bizarre little thing in our ordinance, and the ordinance review committee is going to change that particular issue, so.
Or recommend a change to the ordinance.
Recommend,
Oh,
yeah,
right,
recommend.
sorry.
So you have one entity that is looking
Yeah,
at
so the
whole
planning
thing,
board, if the planning board is
board.
doing it, the planning board makes the decision on
Yeah.
every piece of it, not shoot one over to a new group of people who have no background in it, and.
Yeah, and the ZBA is really, in many communities, the ZBA, their tasks are very limited in what their purview is. And they're more used to dealing with that type of item versus something that's maybe not in their wheelhouse.
And then getting to, further on the CBA, I know that there was some discussion about a traffic and parking study, and that was raised, and I don't know, Doug, if you had wanted to comment on that, but at some point, there was a suggestion that the planning board could commission a traffic study, and of course, the planning board, if anybody in the ZBA is watching, the planning board does not control the purse strings of the town. The select board does that, and so we want to make sure that it's clear that our committees don't have any ability to spend or commit the expenditure of funds, and that's something that we've wrestled with just a few months ago, and that's not true in some of our neighboring towns, as I understand it. So that's a concern. So if any study is to be commissioned, that's something that the select board would have to do.
And not, yeah, I agree, and not having seen the whole meeting, I don't know if they were referencing the fact that in many ordinances, land use ordinances, developers can be charged by the planning board to, they can require them to do traffic or parking studies at the expense of the developers.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
not the case in our ordinance. Our land use
Oh,
ordinance, they're not, they don't have that authority to be able to say, this is required in order for us to continue the review of your proposal. We need a traffic study, or in DOT, for instance, with any type of large construction on any state road, it's required, just automatically required, and any improvements that need to be done to allow that development to be built are at the developer's expense. So, in many communities, ordinances have that language built
Interesting.
into them.
And I have received personally several letters from people inquiring about such a study, and saying they didn't want the developer to do the study because they don't trust what any
Well, it would be-
developer says.
yeah.
They want the town to do it.
Yeah, but the language in the ordinances is written such that the developer pays for it, the town commissions it,
Yeah.
but that the planning board, it's a requirement of a development, so.
It's been my recollection in looking at plans for whether it was a YMCA or the elementary school over there, the architectural firm that made their presentation has given us what the trip count might be on local roads. I know they're not required to, but I do know that some do
Right,
when they give us our packets, or,
yeah. And a traffic study, as you know, Mark, from your background, is much more than just the trip counts.
yeah,
It's
yeah, no, but
the
it's
effect,
a
yeah,
little-
no, you're right. I mean, that's another thing that can be, and any of those things can be required in a land use ordinance. Just the ordinance review committee would need to be tasked with drafting language to put into that.
I know when believe it or not, the Dunkin' Donuts was gonna go over to the old West Street Market, and they commissioned their own survey.
Yep.
They looked at the state material, and they did their own survey and provided it to us. We didn't ask for it, but they gave it to us anyway because I thought it would be useful.
Right.
For those of you who haven't had a chance yet to review the 4 hours that some people sat through, and I did review today, it was suggested by some on the ZBA that they wished that a traffic and parking study had been done like 3 years ago, which of course predates many of us here on the select board, if not all of us. That in hindsight, they wish that it had been done. But then there were others that seemed to, and that seemed to be more the prevailing view, that perhaps you really have to do that kind of study after, for example, the library is built, or certain other
So,
things that might be built are done. So, I mean, it's all something that probably we may need to discuss in the budget process, or not. But I guess my last point that I do want to make is that the there were folks on the ZBA who were concerned that they wanted to send a message to the select board, and they wrangled around about whether or not to send a message to the select board, and they ultimately decided not to, or they decided to table it. And, you know, I want to reiterate what we said at the, Jeff, I know you weren't here at the last meeting, but the rest of us were, and we said, I know I said it twice, not just once, that the vote that we took with respect to off-street parking at the last meeting was not intended to end the discussion on parking. It's beginning the discussion on parking. You know, we took a vote for a certain reason that we feel, you guys tell me if you feel differently, but my sense of the board and what reflects my own views is that we need to address the parking issue as a town. We need to do that. We need to do it in a comprehensive way. We need to do it in a fair way that doesn't say, you know, for one applicant, you have to comply, and another applicant, everything's waived. That concerns me, and so we are addressing it. We're having active discussions. Some of those discussions can't be talked about now because they would involve property contracts, purchase of land. But, you know, some discussions are going on among town staff and others that it's actively being pursued.
With regards to your parking survey that's been done recently or in the process of being done, what standards are they just measuring the distance from one curb up to the sidewalk, or are they doing a standard size parking space? Because
They're doing standard-sized parking spaces.
are they going to also indicate that by doing that, your roads, we may lose stuff?
Yes, but also measuring, you know, curb space, if you will, the length of, you know, from, on Central Street as to where the parking is now, that type of thing. They're looking at everything, really. They're looking at, if you park across the street on Central Street, you've got a drainage ditch there. Well, is that a good place to be parking?
Yeah.
You know, probably not, unless there's some other sort of barrier there. So they're looking at all of that. It's not
Well,
just,
one of the reasons that nothing was ever lined out is because if you did it, you know,
Right.
you're going to end up losing.
Do you own a
So-
Fiat 500 or do you own a
Right.
Ford F-150?
Yeah, all right.
So,
Doug,
But wait, there's more.
you have, no, I was gonna say, you have comments, I think,
Yes,
that you wanted to.
well, yeah, about the parking, or do you want me to just keep going with my?
Oh, I
It's
thought
all
you had some
report.
comments
How's
about
that go?
parking, but if you wanna.
Okay,
You can,
well, I think as everybody
ahead.
knows, that the planning board at its last meeting continued the hotel parking discussion because they were not able to get a transcription of the zoning board's decision the night before. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know some people think we're moving a little too quickly. But having said that, I believe the initial hope was that, you know, the zoning board would make a decision and it would be available the next night for the planning board. So they'd sort of,
don't see how that would be possible other than the verbal.
Well, but
There
they
certainly
have
weren't-
electronics.
Somebody should have seen that coming,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Okay,
that was a waste of people's time.
yeah. Yeah, right, it was, because a lot of people showed up, and when it got continued, the room emptied out. And with regard to that ad hoc committee that we're referring to about the parking, again, I think that's going to be a great place to start. We'll review the 2009 survey, and a lot of these questions about lining, not lining, what are other options are all going to be raised. And I hope that very quickly, this committee will make some actionable recommendations to the select board. I think it's going to take some political will, but there you go. Library construction, this doesn't require a vote of the select board, but I think a sense of the select board would be good. FI, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, anticipates closing off that part of the intersection where their entrance is, and bringing their fence out to the island and then back to the road. And obviously, this isn't something you just do overnight, and I would like the board to have Bill start to work with Public Works, Randy Gagney, to sort of give people the notice that things are gonna be changing in the next couple of weeks. There's gonna be a new traffic pattern, maybe a couple signs, just so that it goes smoothly when it happens in the next couple of weeks.
Does DOT need to be any part of that?
We're essentially closing Russell Avenue, which is ours.
Which is
so
ours,
I
okay.
don't think we need to.
But when that's done, is there enough, is there there's not two-way traffic on the other side of the island, is there? I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
Both sides
well,
are
all I
two-way.
can tell you is it's really tough getting around that area right now. And it's gonna be really tough if, when that happens. I mean,
There's room for cars side by
You
side.
can do two, because if you're going straight down Central, if you're coming with Russell behind you and you're going straight down Central and somebody else is coming up, I mean, I just did that today and they're,
I'm,
on the one side of the island.
Right.
Really, on the one side of the island.
So, the
can
bottom
support
line
that
here is, we
communication.
need to get the
communication would be good,
professionals
yeah.
and
yes,
give people a lot of heads up.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
They
right.
don't like surprises.
Right,
so.
right, right.
So noted, Bill?
So
Oh,
noted.
so what I'm hoping is Bill, what will probably happen is Phi will say to Bill, okay, 1 week from now, we want to close it, and Bill will have done the background work without having to have us do anything more. The other thing about the library construction is, I've had a couple citizens ask me about the external part of the structure, and I want to take everybody back to last summer, early fall, when what our narrative was, we told people, and I would sit right here and say it, was the plan for the library was by Christmas, and certainly no later than January 1st, we would have a final roof on the building would be wrapped, it'd be heated inside, and the guys would be inside working in T-shirts, running the electrical and the plumbing, and people said, well, you're not at that point, that was a month ago. Well, yes, things do change on the construction schedule as we go along, and indeed, we've been very lucky with the weather, I won't deny that. But the bottom line is at our construction meeting today, I'll say it again, we are on schedule for a September, if not August, opening of the library. They kind of worked around things. There are some interior walls going up on this coming Friday or Monday. They will start putting on the ice and rain shield on the roof that will allow them to start with the sheetrock and everything. So, our sharp-eyed constituents that notice our narrative last summer isn't where we are now, don't worry about it. We're still okay. Is that fair?
Yeah, I just think it's important in any construction project that you have a start date and an end date, and while you have marks in the middle that you expect to meet, sometimes those marks will get shifted based on
Yeah.
materials, weather, subcontractors, the like, so, if it's changed, that's the reason, it's not because it's not on schedule, it's just because you do make changes with the schedule within the start and end date, so.
Don't panic. The library committee, this is in follow-up to the foundation. The foundation, as you heard tonight, is committed to helping raise money for furniture, fixture, and all of that, and they're going to get started on that right away. But it's going to take some time to get that money in from them, and the problem is that the order for the furniture really has to go in around March if it's going to be here in time for the grand opening in August or September. So they're going to want to go ahead and buy that furniture. The library committee has committed to giving an advance to the foundation of $100,000 so that they'll be able to go ahead and get the furniture ordered, and then the foundation will pay back or make whole the library committee endowment however long it takes. And they're working out the legal agreement between these two entities, and it seems like a pretty good deal for everybody. Library Building Committee meets tomorrow, afternoon. Investment Committee has not had a meeting. Parks Committee meets February 12th, and we hope to have a preliminary info on a bid package for the library side of the landscaping. And we will probably have Keith Smith, the landscape architect, attend our March meeting for final approval of that bid package before the select board makes the decision about sending it out. Thank you. Sorry to be so long.
45 minutes, Doug.
You just gotta get to the hospital.
I'll drive you now if you want to go.
Denise.
Let's see, Legacy Rockport, I reported last time, and this continues to be the case. They're working towards a March 15th celebration in Rockport for the Maine Bicentennial. A big piece of that will be a community supper in the Opera House. They're submitting a grant application to the state that'll help offset the cost of that dinner for the people who sign up for the dinner. The ZBA, you heard my comments about that. ORC, we've been meeting, the Ordinance Review Committee, we've been meeting weekly, primarily focused on the land use ordinance, clarifying, cleaning up some things that became obvious during the course of the library appeal and others who've just looked more closely at that ordinance. And we're finding ways that we can improve on it and make it easier for people to understand how that ordinance works. And Doug covered the library building committee, so we're good.
Jeff, do you have anything?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's going to be short. Harbor Committee meeting next week. No update on the Capital Improvement Committee. Rec Committee.
Enough said.
The dates in the calendar and times of the meeting are apparently not correct, and I'm going to have to personally chase down the chairman of that committee. Pathways, had a good summit last week at Flatbread with Pathways Committee and multiple other organizations that are very much into the same type of thing. One of the outcomes was a desire to develop a common map so that all these groups that have developed pathways and hiking paths and routes in the entire area all land on one either website or piece of paper. And they're going to get together again with another summit later on. That's it.
Mark?
Doug covered Parks and Recs, Conservation. We had a workshop, if you will, early January. Next meeting will be in February, and the date escapes me, but I want to say they moved them to Wednesdays to make it. It's either the 12th or the 19th, but the next one's in February. No Capital Improvement Committee action, but I think it would be important for them to get an updated list, minus anything that we are taking off of it because of the bond, and have them do a reevaluation of what's left.
Yeah.
And,
For budget time.
yeah,
Yeah, so we gotta have them revise a list of what's hot and what's not.
yep, and there again, I mean, I think they did a pretty thorough job, so I don't know if there'd be anything to add to it, but just a revised list after we extract everything that's covered in the bond. Good.
That's it. Okay. So Midco Solid Waste, Bill already mentioned the budget, and he's been very helpful on the Finance Committee, a permanent place for him. So I think that means that I can get off, Bill.
Thanks.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
However, I do chair the governance committee on the group, and we have a meeting on Wednesday And we have recommended some bylaw changes for the organization, which the Midco Solid Waste Board has the ability to change their own bylaws, unlike the interlocal agreement, which has to go to the, to town vote for the 4 towns. So for right now, we're recommending changes to the bylaws that will make the ability to get quorums easier, not having to have 2 town managers be present and a facility manager in order to have a quorum, which is crazy. When you've got an 8-member board, you not only have to have the majority, however that majority is counted, which is another issue, of the board, but you have to have 2 managers who are ex officio and can't vote anyway, and a facility manager who is also ex officio and can't vote. So, so hopefully that's going to get changed on Wednesday, along with a number of other items. That's it. All right. Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Go into executive session to discuss personnel pursuant to 1 MRS Section 4056A.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor, 500.